Who is the best Warframe in the game? There really isn't much of a way to find out, if I'm being honest. All the empirical evidence is kind of shoddy at best, but I have a list here that I'm pretty freaking confident in. So if you want to skip right to the list, skip to the timestamp I've placed on the screen for you. I've chaptered it for your convenience. But before you go, I'm going to be listing some disclaimers here, so if you have a disagreement, try to refer back to this part of this video, as there are important things regarding my decision making. Or just say the mean things in the comment section blindly. I don't really care. Also, I put a lot of effort into editing for this one, so please leave feedback on the editing along with your insults in the comments. Let's begin with the disclaimers. Disclaimer 1. I cheat twice in this list. There are 2 ties in the list, leading to 12 Warframes instead of 10. If you have a problem with more content, I'm very sorry to hear that. You may click off this video. You will be missed. Love you. The ties are not just because the frames are equal in strength, but because they are so close in premise and playstyle that it feels wrong to have them in different slots, or having one on the list and one off, so on and so forth. Because of that cheating, I'm placing them in the 10 and 9 spot respectively. You can create your own headcanon idea of like where they actually belong, but because I'm cheating, they're going lower on the list. My bad. Discover 2 is there is very little in the way of empirical or objective data on the performance of Warframes. They're basically pick rates and the small amount of damage and efficiency testing that I can perform, and even both of those metrics kind of blow. So I'll be using somewhat subjective, but also I believe fair and relevant metrics to determine the strength of these frames, such as ability to be used in many pieces of intended content. Level cappers, obviously there's a lot of correlation between the strength of a frame and intended content and level cap, but I am not a level cap specialist. There are specialists out there, seek those guys out. Love them. Efficiency to complete the content, ease of use relative to other options, whether that's like mechanically or getting a build together, like maybe the frame is too reliant on like a synergy or whatever with a weapon. I am almost 100% confident about my list itself, but not the ranking within, as those are more open to bias, as like it's innately more open to bias. Attribute 80% of this list to my true testing that I've done, and then 20% as like biased opinion. I can't really help it. When there is bias present, I'll make it clear. I'll also be listing off the 5 frames that sit under the top at the end of the video in hopes that I will get fewer rocks thrown through my window at night. So disclaimer 3, some of these frames have been goats for a very long time. For the ones that I feel warrant less explanation, for example, Saren, who's on this list of course, I'm going to try to be more brief and matter of fact because I don't think I have to justify her position. But for those who are maybe newer to the game and haven't been playing for as long as I have, I will still explain why I think they're OP. I just won't be trying to make any arguments towards it because most players just know Saren's good. And the final disclaimer is that each frame is allowed 1 augment without negatively impacting my evaluation. Do you lose a mod slot? Yes, but like there's so many augments and the band-aid augment problem has gotten really widespread, and so a margin of error of 1 augment seems totally fair. Let's get into the list. Hope you guys enjoy. Don't forget to like and sub. Love you. See you soon. Rank 10, Gauss and Volt, our first tie on the list. Gauss is straight up one of the best weapon platforms in the game. There's going to be a trend present in this list, and that is a frame's ability to pick up random mid-tier weapons, or like random loadouts in general, and help them compete with the best of loadouts. Gauss does an incredible job with that, instantly removing weaknesses from weapons like the Trumna and its reload speed, or the Kuba Chakra with its fire rate and reload speed. I prefer the way Gauss does it compared to straight Harrow does this as well. Like relative to straight damage buffers, because it not only buffs already strong weapons, but weapons that have very niche weaknesses, like that reload speed, like that fire rate, weaknesses that are not just raw damage. Harrow and Gauss in this case get rid of those, which is a way more fun and engaging way, as opposed to just, oh, strong weapon stronger, caveman shit. Gauss elects to make weapons with other weaknesses stronger as well, which is good. Mach Rush is incredible. Mach Rush allows you to move through the map. Now granted, it needs some skill, and I think even the best Gauss players will eat some concrete on the way, but you're not really a real Gauss player if you're not eating the walls. So just my opinion, of course, but you're much faster than the average Warframe, even with like a little bit of skill in Mach Rush, especially in those straightaways where, Mach Rush doesn't really require skill. Gauss, kinetic plating basically makes him immortal. There are a few niche instances where you can still die. Poor battery management, poor energy management, not really. Certain statuses, I believe, get through kinetic plating, but it gives you energy, makes you immortal effectively. You are all good as long as you're even remotely like aware of your surroundings. Thermal Sunder does everything. Okay, so you get damage, you get CC, you get damage and CC with the heat panic, and you can strip armor. And if you use thermal transfer, you get on command blast damage, or heat damage if you want to keep it that way, but I think you should always use blast when using thermal transfer, as it combines the cold and the heat damage percentages, so the blast is always good. Blast is an incredible element to guarantee to have status, right? So the thing is, Gauss already removes some weaknesses from low fire rate and low reload speed weapons. He adds damage, and also he gives blast with the augment, meaning that single target weapons that can sometimes struggle now have the high fire rate and blast status necessary to make them effectively AoE. This is absolutely incredible. I really strongly recommend the thermal transfer augment, but thermal thunder on its own ability to just freeze entire rooms, armor ship entire rooms. The heat panic is way more valuable than people leave it on to be. And then Redline, of course. It is the single best piece of Warframe sound design in the entire game, and gives you the most stupid amount of stats that allows Gauss to blow through basically any content. Now, Gauss is really unique in the way that he scales with duration for a lot of the stats in his kit, especially Redline, and that is really cool. I think, and Noko is a huge indicator of this. We're getting in this case where frames get kind of boring and their builds become very predictable and stale. Gauss is the opposite. You can build in so many ways. My two main builds I use, which I won't be showing too many builds in this video. I'll be making guides for all of these frames later in my Warframe career, so don't worry about that. Gauss can pivot more into duration because it's more comfortable, helps with battery management because you keep Redline and Kinetic play with it for longer. Or if you pivot into some power strength and you use a certain helmet option, Nourish, Shock with Shock Trooper, Roar, whatever, you can move more towards power strength. Gauss feels like you can build him in so many different ways and he still exceeds. It just changes the playstyle. One piece of bias, and like I said, I'm always going to make my bias very clear, is that I love Gauss's battery mechanic. I love any Warframe mechanic where I have to put even a little bit of thought into how I'm, piloting and executing the Warframe mechanically. Gauss's battery, while not being extremely difficult to use, is insanely fun and keeps you on your toes and is just way more exciting. If you have not played this frame yet, you really, really, really should. He basically makes any weapon good. Incredible sound design, fun to pilot, fun to play. The only reason I can imagine you don't want to play Gauss is if you are more of that idle player, maybe like a Protea player. That's me, by the way. But it's, I like a lot of play styles. If you like to stay still and do like zone denial, Gauss without his battery being charged is not as good of a Warframe. But you should be playing with the battery. That's part of the kit, right? Gauss also does have like a little shield recharge mechanic in his passive, but kinetic plating usually means that won't be necessary, combined with like adaptation or other external DR sources. Gauss is straight up insane, and obviously he's one of the best frames in the game, and that's why he's on this list. And if he wasn't tied with another entry here, he would definitely be a little bit higher. This frame's insane. Please give him a try. He's a great all-arounder. So taking a look at Volt, Volt provides quite a bit. You have Shock, which is a bit of a dead ability, especially late game. But Shock Trooper is an insane augment, especially with context that we know, melee influence is broken. Again, I hate it, you hate it, it's annoying, it suffocates every build, but it is the truth. It is the way the game is played, and since I can't include my opinion here, this is just what I think is strong. Yeah, Shock Trooper's nuts. Shocker, no pun intended, whatever. I think that the Shock Trooper augment ascends the ability being dead. Totally fine. Speed is nothing flashy, but it's very simple to use. It's great stats right out the gate. No casting speed, which means it's great for shield gating setups. Electric shield, really good. Survivability, damage, some niche interactions like buffing operator damage, stuff like that. Really, really solid. Discharge can nuke at low levels really easily, but also acts as a great survivability tool through the CC it provides, and then if you're using capacitance as well, which is an augment, unfortunately, but that provides a ton of shields, and if you use Arcane Aegis, you're basically immortal. There you go. Volt is very good at abusing broken arcanes. Would you look at that? Anyways, so Volt, so you get really great survivability, you can do shield tanking, you can do shield gating, you get really great weapon platform stats. If you elect to, and this is how a lot of Volt builds end up looking, you get the precision intensify slot taken up by Roar when you take discharge out, which is how a lot of builds look. You get a really, really insane weapons platform. And when you get a build like that, which obviously if you're using Discharge, you're giving your team survivability. With Capacitance, if you're using Roar, you're giving your team more damage. But usually you give your team Shock Trooper, you give your team Speed, you give your team Shields if they want them. Again, that's kind of a pain in the butt. And then you give your team Roar. So you get, the modding selection is really strong. You can go for range if you need to, but if you're going full weapons platform, again, like a lot of Volt builds look, then you're just going to build for duration and strength, which gives your team pretty substantial buffs. So what is the difference between Volt and Gauss? Because Gauss is a better Warframe on an individual basis. That is, that's objectively true. That's a fact. I'm sorry. I think it's true. Again, there's only that I can't point to any stats. This is such a pain. I'm a student too. I feel like I'm doing academic dishonesty. Yeah, I'd say Gauss is a better Warframe. However, where the tie comes in is, first of all, obviously anyone who's played Gauss and Volt for longer than 30 minutes understands their gameplay loop is very similar. You run around and you kill things, and you do it way faster than the average Warframe does, while getting cucked by Titania your entire life when it comes to speed. Everyone knows that. The main difference, and the main reason that they're tied, though, is that while Gauss on an individual basis is stronger, Volt provides 3 of his 4 abilities, whether that is Roar or Discharge, depending on how you Helminth. Or I guess other options are totally possible, but I'm just looking at what I see in the meta. Volt gives that to his teammates. Volt gives Shock Trooper, Volt gives Speed, and Volt gives Roar or Discharge Capacitance to his team. Volt provides so much more to his team, while Gauss is a lot more selfish. Now, obviously, if we're talking thermal transfer, you do give thermal transfer to your teammates, which is quite strong, for sure. Absolutely, I wouldn't deny that. But Volt as a support is so strong. The other condition is that, and this could be a skill issue, yell at me, I love Gauss. For reference, I like Gauss a lot more than Volt in terms of playing. But for some people, the battery is a mechanic they don't feel like dealing with when on Gauss. And I get that. Don't agree, but I get it. Also, Gauss's battery and Gauss's whole playstyle in general, especially if you're using Lock Rush, is annoying to do on certain tile sets. Some tile sets just suck for Gauss. It's really hard to have fun with him on certain tile sets. You can't charge the battery, you can't use half of his kit. Getting above red line is so paramount to playing Gauss, and it's super annoying to do on some of the tile sets where Gauss can't charge his battery. Volt is conditionless. Volt just gets it done. Like, you tell Volt to jump, he says how high. Gauss says, do I have room to jump? That's a problem for me. So that's where this tie kind of comes from. Volt is better as support and also has less conditions, has more upfront value. While if you're a player who doesn't do well with the battery, or you're on a tile set that does, or both, right? That both are possible. Then you just get less out of Gauss straight up, while Volt does what it says on the tin, which I think is a very big deal. So that's where the tie comes from. If you're upset about it, sorry, can't help you. You could call me bad words in the comment. That's fine. Let's get to the next ranking. Alright, and unfortunately for the number 9 slot, we gotta pit 2 bad bitches up against each other again. But here we go. So, Gara and Korra. Starting with Korra here. So Korra's been one of the strongest frames in the game for a while, and kind of just keeps getting like direct and indirect buffs, especially with the pseudo exalted stuff. Kind of everyone got a taste of Korra, which, okay, bad word, but you know what I'm saying. Everyone got to understand how strong Korra is because the stat sticks got removed, and so everyone got to mod Whip Claw directly, which was really strong. My bad, I got words. Yeah, I'm not cutting that out. Anyway, everyone got to mod Whip Claw, and Whip Claw is really easy to mod, so ended up just being really strong. Whip Claw is just stupid amounts of damage over a stupid amount of area, and able to use melee influence as well to expand that area in damage. Casts really quickly, and can be spam casted, and should be spam casted, and so you get a lot of shield getting that way. Functions really good with the augment, which is you're generally going to run, which is accumulated Whip Claw, and does not need power strength, which most damage abilities seem to need power strength. Whip Claw does not use it as nearly as much. Ensnare is probably one of the single best CC and grouping abilities, and also in terms of Helminth, it works really well there as well. It groups, it CCs, works on acolytes, groups without the ragdoll effect that like larva, pole, options like that have, so you can use headshot weapons a lot more conveniently. Venari is the active ability, but you also get Venari as a passive, so you can remove the third ability of Venari, which is like that, you know, the commands you give Venari essentially, but you don't really need those, so you just get a free Helminth slot. Generally that ends up with Lycath's Hunt or Nourish. Those are the two that I see a lot of, but anything you can run. Just the fact that Korra wants to max range, and so it doesn't end up with as much strength, you end up with a kind of a different build. Additionally, I guess I didn't really mention this, you get an entire companion, an entire moddable companion as a passive. That is broken, especially with companions being reworked and just busted. Again, indirect buffs on top of indirect buffs on top of direct buffs. This Korra is absolutely stupid. And Strangle Dome is pretty solid CC over a wide area, and Pilfering and Strangle Dome is going to be the main reason people use this ability, as targeting enemies with your usual weaponry kind of stinks with Strangle Dome. And is that 2 augments? Yes, but they're usually for 2 distinct purposes. For example, on my on my Korra build, where my goal is just to kill things, I don't always run Pilfering and Strangle Dome. And when I'm playing support for loot, I don't always run Accumulated Whip Claw. That's just how it goes. The frame is so strong, running 2 augments just straight up does not matter. Her playstyle is so easy. You can go with the Invis companion setup with Crepuscular and not firing any weapons, or my preferred playstyle, which is using primers like the Cedo Prime and the Epitaph to amplify your Whip Claw. Korra is disgustingly simple and even more disgustingly strong. This frame is really, really good and has been really, really good. I feel like I needed to explain it because she's got some changes that have adjusted her place, but they've only sent her upwards. Gara shares a really similar playstyle to Korra, but with some key differences in actual execution. Gara's passive is much weaker than Korra's, but you basically are able to, every couple of abilities essentially, you're going to be blinding enemies, which is fine, but you already have a good means of defense. So unless you're planning on using melee finishers, it's not nearly that useful. You spam your 1, Shattered Lash, and it's piloted very similar to Whip Claw. You spam that bad boy. You don't need the shield gating that you would normally get because Gara has Splinter Storm, which is one of the most hilariously overloaded abilities in the game. It provides its own 90% DR really easily with a really low strength threshold. It can create infinitely scaling instant kill auras that also give damage vulnerability around the area, and it makes Gara unkillable, everything else around it very killable, and kills it on its own. And she can cast this on her teammates, on objectives, on herself in the same breath, and manage those using Mass Vitrify, which we'll talk about in a second. But Spectra Rage, her third ability, is fine. It's solid CC and solid utility, but when you have tools like Shattered Lash to wipe entire areas and Mass Vitrify to CC and wipe entire areas, Spectra Rage becomes not as useful. The augment's fine, Spectro Siphon, but in my experience, it's better used on frames that have better grouping. So, Mass Vitrify. Probably, in my opinion, I could be wrong, one of the most consistent low-level nuke abilities in the entire game at relatively low investment. Scales on its own within Splinter Storm. Disgusting ability. Freezes enemies, so if you don't want to use Shattered Lash all the time and you want to freeze the enemies solid, strip their defenses, which Massive Vitrify does. It uses their defenses to build the wall. Enemies are frozen, easy to headshot. Crazy wall of defense, so you can put your Splinter Storm on the defense to give it DR, and you can put your Mass Vitrify on it to give it a physical protection. Insanely strong. And of course you can blow the wall up and nuke the entire map. Whatever you want. The builds that prioritize Shattered Lash in terms of nuking and Mass Vitrify in terms of nuking, they're a bit different because Shattered Lash doesn't crit in the same traditional sense. So you kind of, or not, Shattered Lash crits, Mass Vitrify does not crit when you Shattered Lash it. So when you're doing a Mass Vitrify build, it does look a little bit different because it scales off just the melee combo and the base damage. And I think maybe one other thing that I can't think of off the top of my head. But anyway, both builds absolutely nuke the living shit out of anything that they see. It's more of a matter of if you're going against higher level Steel Path or mid-level standard Star Chart stuff that determines whether you use the Shattered Lash or Mass Vitrify. You'll use the Mass Vitrify build against lower level targets and Shattered Lash build into the higher rank stuff. So both of these frames are categorically nuts. The difference in individual strength is not as obvious as Gauss and Volt. Gauss and Volt, I can explain real easy which one you should play based on your playstyle. Korra is easier to get the most out of, I would say. She's way easier to pilot. Gara's cap for potential is just higher, in my opinion, by a decent margin. But it's just not really needed in Warframe's current state. I could see a future where Gara has to manage 4 Splinter Storms on all of her teammates, maybe the objective, and use that Vitrify and call people to come over onto her Vitrify to refresh their shit. It's not needed. That's something that can exist, but it's not needed. Warframe is not that hard of a game. Both their playstyles, warheads on foreheads, press the 1 button, call it a day. Survivability functions a little different. One shield gates and really heavily relies on it. One uses DR a lot. Both of their third abilities are helmet slots. Utility ults are similar. One gives more loot, one gives more utility and damage. So it's pretty insane. Gara does provide a little bit more team-friendly CC in her ult, but also Korra provides the ultimate team-friendly CC in terms of ensnare. So this one is really up to you. You like cats? Play Korra. You like glass? Play Gara. Certain aesthetics you like, It's up to you. You want my personal opinion? I like Gara quite a bit more, and I do think she's a little bit stronger. But Korra is so easy to play and get the most out of. So that one, with the Gauss and Volt, it's a little more cut and dry. With Gara and Korra, I do think it is the closest thing possible, and it was the first tie I made on this list. And it is the last in this case. So we're going to move on to the number 8 slot, and thank you guys for listening. Revenant. Revenant is effectively immortal with his 2 at any given time. You could take away any other ability he has, and it really wouldn't matter. I think Revenant is poorly designed in that regard. I think his 2 cannibalizes his whole kit. I wrote an entire rework of him. It's on this channel, and I think it's quite good. But this is not an opinion piece. So Revenant's other abilities do in fact do something, and they're quite good. Besides his passive, that shit sucks, but don't worry about that. In Thrall, you can actually grab yourself pretty great teammates, like certain Ancients, certain Nextmas, and their abilities can be kind of nice to have, assuming you don't instantly like murder your Thralls. Thrall Pact can also give some pretty insane damage on your primary. I wish it wasn't gated to your primary, but whatever, it's fine. If you're not instantly killing your Thralls, which can happen a lot. Master Skin. That's really it. That's all I really have to say. If that's not enough, you can run Mesmer Shield and give it to your old team. As it turns out, being invulnerable, when you can do it that easily, identifies and cannibalizes the entire kit. Shocker. Sorry, I just like this frame. You are invulnerable, and you can make your team invulnerable, and that's all she wrote. Reeve is fun. I like Reeve a lot, actually. Really fun damage when it's built for. It can do, you know, percent health true damage, vamps health and shields. Overall, Reeve is super fun. As a mobility tool, also super fun. I wish there was more of that in the kit. It does, but it's a little bit hard to mod for at times. Danse Macabre, or however you pronounce it, Revenance 4 is quite good, actually, especially with the new Bright Bonnet build. It's actually pretty good. It scales really hard, but generally speaking, that ability will be taken away for the Roar plus Precision Intensify combo. I always struggle saying Roar. Anyway, you can also give up the Reeve if you want, because you can actually use Reeve during Danse Macabre, I think by pressing Shift or right-clicking, one of the two, I don't remember. But yeah, Revenant is not... it's not a hard choice to have him on this list. I'm putting him at the bottom with some slight bias because I just don't like his kit. I think it's too overloaded into the 2. Again, in that rework, I write about how we should allocate less power to the 2 and more power to the rest of his kit so we can do more. But that's to the point. Revenant's amazing, and if you think Revenant looks cool, you know that, and you like the way he plays, go for it. As an accessibility option, which is a lot of people's argument, go for it. I want more people playing my favorite game. So if Revenant's how you do that, I don't give a shit. But yeah, this frame's super good. Keeps you immortal. If you're having a new player who's really struggling, Revenant's a great choice. So are some other choices on this list, but yeah, Revenant's immortal, and therefore he is strong. It's not anything super special that he does. You can make the case that Reeve's pretty nuts, especially if you build for it and get like a grouping combo going, but that's really it. It's really because Revenant cannot die, no matter how hard you try. Rhino, in my view, is the time-tested GOAT of Warframe. And basically every iteration he's been in, he's really never failed me, or anyone else that I know for that matter. Like 7 years ago, before Prime Resurgence came back, I bought a Rhino Prime set for like 600 plat. I'm pretty sure I got scammed, but anyway, this guy is just straight fundamentals. Well, if you have like some advanced mechanics knowledge, like Rhino mains know, you get a lot more out of him, but his base kit is still insanely strong. Passive kind of blows, that's okay. Some of these frames do just have subpar passives. Rhino Charge allows you to move some serious distance, and if you have skill with it, you know it will preserve your momentum, allowing you to move ridiculously fast for a guy as big as Rhino. Pretty impressive stuff. The augment also assists with armor, which is good because Iron Skin actually scales with armor. This is unique. I like this a lot about Iron Skin, even though Iron Skin's a very basic ability. It scales with how it's a defense that scales with how much damage you take. That's perfect. That's perfect design. There you go. You're never gonna die, ideally. But you can use the armor from Ironclad Charge to buff up your Iron Skin. You can mod for the armor and get just a ton of defense that way. There's multiple ways to use Iron Skin, but generally they all kind of achieve the same effect. Roar is the single best universal damage application in the entire game. I wish there were more options, if I'm being totally truthful, but as of now, Rhino has it, and it is the best as far as I'm concerned. And he's got the homegrown shit. He doesn't have that Helmet Strand knockoff BS that's nerfed, right? He gets the real thing, and when he mods for it, it gets absolutely insane. Rhino Stomp is probably one of the most underrated CC abilities in the game, and that's because I think a lot of Rhino players do end up building for that like strength duration bottleneck, and so Rhino Stomp becomes less useful. Reinforcing Stomp is incredibly good as well, but yeah, Rhino Stomp, you just press 4 and any non-Eximus enemy is just sitting in the air waiting to die. The only thing is that generally Rhino is invulnerable anyway, thanks to Iron Skin. He spends a lot of time alive and totally defensed up, so you don't end up needing the CC as much, and teamwork isn't as prevalent in Warframe, so there's a whole other conversation about that. But yeah, if you're eating like Jade Light, Eximus, Light Beam, 19 course meals on Iron Skin, you'll be totally fine. Rhino has like a slight, I hesitate to call it an augment problem, because he doesn't. My playstyle personally doesn't. I just treat Iron Skin as a very interchangeable barrier. But if you're using the playstyle where you gain like, and a lot of Rhino mains are like this, where you build the biggest overguard number possible, you use Ironclad Charge, you use Reinforcing Stomp, you do kind of lose out to mod slots that could go towards other things, which is a bummer. But those are like the general two ways to play Rhino. Either use Reinforcing Stomp, you only have to gain the 1 gazillion Iron Skin value once, and then you use Reinforcing Stomp to get it back. Or for me, I kind of treat Iron Skin as a replaceable, barrier that I just keep popping back on. So this one doesn't require much explanation. Rhino's just the GOAT. Very likely going to be invulnerable. Gives your team and himself a bunch of damage, and is a whole lot of fun to play. His entire aesthetic is cool. Sound design on Rhino Stomp, all of his abilities are sick, and you get him so early on. This frame will grow with you in the game, and I think that has some value to it as well. Amazing frame. You guys know that. Mirage's goal is to turn enemies into integers. See those bags of bones, those sacks of blood? Turn them into a number. While buffing your own number, everything is a number to Mirage. Mirage has been one of the best weapons platforms basically ever since they adjusted her Eclipse to become a tap hold cast, as opposed to the weird lighting level stuff they had going on. I don't mean to remind anyone of that. That was quite awful. But she is, ever since that change, she's been just absolutely reliable, amazing. Her passive, pretty good. Sliding lasts 85% longer, and acrobatic maneuvers are 50% faster. That is good. That's like 1.75 Tau yellows for parkour velocity. That's incredible. You'd want that on any Warframe, so it's great on Mirage, who's already good on their own. Hall of Mirrors redirects enemy aggression and gives you bonus damage. The augment, Hall of Malevolence, gives you even more damage. Incredibly good. Damage is damage. We like it. A lot of unique interactions. Really strong with AoE weapons because it multiplies the projectiles. Really good with melee as all the clones swing. So there's a lot of really big benefits to using Hall of Mirrors besides just damage. Sleight of Hand is a fine ability. At worst, it's kind of some additional CC by trapping things and blinding enemies. But at lower levels, Explosive Ledger Main allows for a stupid amount of AoE damage in a stupid radius. If you want to nuke low-level enemies really easily, Explosive Ledger Main, Sleight of Hand Mirage is going to be the setup you want to go for. Absolutely incredible. Eclipse is amazing. Best of both worlds. You get a ton of raw damage. If you don't need the damage, you get almost the highest DR available in the game at 90%, just at the click of a button, while reducing the accuracy of enemies as well. So you have the aggression redirection from Hall of Mirrors, the accuracy reduction from Eclipse, and the DR from Eclipse. Absolutely amazing. And the number for Eclipse for the damage just goes so stupidly high, and it's one of the defining parts of why Mirage is just so incredibly good. Makes almost any weapon pretty solid just from a base number standpoint. Prism is fine. I would say it does nuke at decent respectable levels. The problem is that Mirage on average is just better with a weapon in her hand, and Prism works on its own too. It's just there's some energy concerns there, maybe some range concerns, but Prism's just a great ability to have on the side there, and because Sleight of Hand already acts as your helmet slot in the majority of builds, Prism gets to stay there, and you can use it for whatever, at worst, it's an incredible blind, and at best, it's nuking the entire map. Oh no, God forbid, right? So Prism is really good as a nuking tool, even though Mirage is best focused on just with raw weapons. So, and you know, you can use Eclipse. Eclipse's augment total eclipse buffs your Hall of Mirror clones, which is just stupid. It can buff your companions, it can buff your teammates if you build a respectable amount of range, which in some cases I might recommend actually. Or if your allies are in makeout distance, which I know a lot of people who would like to be in makeout distance of Mirage, so I get that. Moving on to a quick note I left in my script here though. Mirage and Rhino are pretty close to interchangeable. I just believe that Rhino is a little bit crutched by Roar in terms of what we want in the current damage meta. Roar is incredible, but like he gives it to other Warframes in the Helmet system, and the Helmet system does not nerf it far enough. Other frames can use it almost as well as he can, like Noko and Protea, and even if they don't, we're in a meta where we're overkilling everything by like 10x anyways, so Roar just becomes a lot less valuable. It's not like the strongest case, but it is why I believe Mirage is just a better frame than Rhino. The amount of damage you get is just stupid, and while Rhino's great, his most defining ability can be sent off to other frames, which I don't think is an amazing feature. But they're both really good. We're talking about the best frames in the game who are within one slot of each other, so please don't be dramatic in the comments. And if you're going to do that, just be respectful, boost my engagement, I don't really care. Let's move on to the next selection. Kullervo is absolutely disgusting. This is an incredible Warframe. A lot of players find him a little bit gated to melee play, and while that is certainly where he's the strongest, absolutely, I don't think he's gatekept there. I'm going to kind of prove that here as best I can. His passive helps a lot with heavy attack builds and makes Wrathful Advance a lot more efficient to use. And both these abilities are kind of gated to melee. Like, you wouldn't be wrong in saying that, but the numbers on them, both his passive and Wrathful Advance, are just stupid. That's so much flat critical chance. It's a little bit dumb. So those two abilities in their own rights, the passive and the first ability, Wrathful Advance, are just really, really strong for melee. But Wrathful Advance does have a free range teleport tied to it that, if you get really good at using, can actually help you outpace a lot of speedster frames, which people don't really know about. In addition, Wrathful Advance does reset your jump maneuvers, so you can bullet jump after you Wrathful Advance. That is really good. I would say if you get skilled at using Wrathful Advance, it becomes a way more valuable ability besides just the damage buff it provides. Recompense is really good, but once you get the augment and volatile recompense, it becomes broken. I don't know what they were thinking when they released this augment, but it does fix the main problem that Kullervo had at higher levels. So yeah, volatile recompense is not necessary until you get to higher levels, but it will make the experience at all levels a whole lot more comfortable. Basically, recompense just gives you infinite overguard. It doesn't have a cap built in. Yes. Does that really matter? No, you're constantly refilling overguard. Very few gaps in survivability if you're executing it properly. That's even like a stretch. If you have your monitor on, you really shouldn't be dying as Kullervo with volatile recompense available to you. Really good ability. Speaking of really good abilities, one of my favorite in the game, and one of the best in the game in my view, is Collective Curse. This ability is awesome. You just redirect damage everywhere. This means you get access to quadratic scaling, and dealing damage to enemies deals damage to enemies, which deals damage to enemies. It is absolutely the most ridiculous thing ever, and something that I think a lot of people don't appreciate, right? So Kullervo already, with Wrathful Advance and his passive, already makes like 90 to 95% of the melee weapons in the game at worst viable, and at best insanely stupidly strong, but now can also use Collective Curse to make weaknesses from fire rate, reload speed, or like the single target nature of certain weapons, where they struggle with KPM, weapons like bows, sniper rifles, hand cannons, gun blades, weapons adjacent to those subclasses, can now absolutely obliterate entire swarms of enemies with no effort. I love a frame where you can just equip whatever weapon you feel like, just vibes-based arsenal, press the random button for all you care. Kullervo is gonna make it happen whether you like it or not. Absolutely love Collective Curse, and I think on its own, it warrants the fact, if you wanted to play gun Kullervo, Collective Curse on its own warrants the fact that maybe your passive and your first don't do a whole lot for guns, unfortunately. Storm of Ukko does a decent bit for guns. It's actually just more damage in an area, which is not bad at all. We absolutely like that, and granted, it was better back when armor and health worked the way it did, but overall it's still just more damage, and at worst it's a precision intensify slot, and nobody is going to complain about that. Modding Kalervo is very easy. This is one of the best frames you can get early on, if possible. Just the damage is stupid. He is damage incarnate. He enables so many loadouts, and I think he has one of the harder times earning his spot on this list, but he absolutely should not. Any frame where you can just bring in whatever loadout and he will make it work is beautiful. You get the nothing personnel kid teleport, absolutely lovely. Basically the best melee frame in the game, unkillable with volatile recompense and recompense on its own. You really want to equip the augment at higher levels so you don't give yourself carpal tunnel with this too. That's gonna feel awful. Collective curse, making just any weapon viable no matter what its weakness is, really. And then Storm Vuko, again, at best it can nuke low levels, and at worst it's a precision intensify slot, which any frame wants. And yeah, Kalervo's just stupidly strong. Love him to death. Come on, like, have you seen the deluxe skin, dude? Like, get a grip. This frame is absolutely amazing. Hey gang, I'm currently recording this segment from an underground bunker to prevent a Zephyr player from dive bombing me in real life. Zephyr is the only entry on this list I actively do not enjoy playing, and it seems a lot of other people feel that way. I'm not sure if the pick rates are up to date. Maybe the DE needs to release a Gunner heirloom skin. I don't know, but we'll talk more about that in a second. Not the Gunner part, but like why people might not enjoy playing her as much. Zephyr's passive is incredibly good. You get bonus stats in the air and movement. The falling slower thing, there's an excellent slot mod that can take care of it. It's not a big deal. Don't complain. It's in my opinion, it's skill issue. Getting 150% critical hit chance while in the air, really good. Tailwind is like 3 abilities in one, essentially. Each one has their own use. The default tab cast is going to send Zephyr flying in a direction. This can be a little bit difficult to control, but it moves insanely quick, insanely far. Really, really good. Just, again, it moves really fast. It's hard to control. If you hold cast, you just chill in the air, which lets you really easily utilize your passive with a wide variety of weapons. And it keeps you pretty safe from the only weakness you really have, which we'll go over in a second when we go over Turbulence. Likewise, if you do the tap cast aiming downwards, in like a general downwards direction, you'll do a dive bomb, which has first of all, looks very cool, sounds very cool, but there is an entire build around it with an augment, which is incredibly good. I believe that's target fixation, and that's like a damage cap build you could perform as far as I know. So yeah, Tailwind you get a ton from. It's pretty unwise, I'd say, to remove this ability. I don't think it's worth it. You just get a lot from it, and the drain for the hold is like nothing. Airburst, you either get grouping or dispersion. It's a tap cast or hold cast. It's amazing. It's got an augment that is pretty unique, I'd say. It gives base damage to secondary weapons. I wish this gave stats to any weapon. I feel like it would be absolutely insane, and a lot more people would keep Airburst on Zephyr, but it's just not excellent. It's still a very good ability, and it's super good at grouping. It's annoying that it ragdolls the enemies, but it's really nice. It opens up some modding avenues with secondaries because it gives you your base damage, which is incredibly good. Lets you use like an enervate setup or whatever instead of having to run Deadhead or Merciless. Turbulence is stupid. It's effectively invulnerability disguised as like, a gimmick. It is very cool, admittedly. It creates like an aura around you that deflects projectiles, and what is counted as a projectile is a whole lot of shit. If you're, again, like Kalervo, if your monitor's turned on, Turbulence will make it so that you cannot die. There are certain statuses that can clip you, which can be annoying. AoE attacks might be able to get you, and if a melee enemy actually manages to hit you, I don't know, again, turn your monitor on, whatever. It's unlikely that you will ever die, and as long as Turbulence is active, and if you're using Tailwind's hover passive. Zephyr's tornadoes are the stupidest part of her kit, and it's not even close. Just absolutely ridiculous ability. Damage multipliers of multiple kinds, elemental absorption, just the sheer amount of them and the movement of them. They have their own AI, basically, the grouping on them if you're not using funnel clouds. The fact that you can cast them stationary or tracking, insanely good. Again, funnel clouds, the augment, gives you multiple ways to play properly just based on your desired use case. Regardless, you just get the most absurd damage humanly possible, especially if you use certain built-in synergies that real Zephyr players know about, like the real Zephyr tech. I don't personally know all of them. I've had some pretty great experiences with like Acid Shell Sobek, the Vadiara Prime, however you pronounce that, and a couple others. But real Zephyr knowers, and there are great Zephyr videos out there. You guys should drop your tech in the comments. Tornado feels like it was coded in like 1990 on the Atari or something. I don't know. The numbers are just so stupid with Zephyr. It is so dumb. You're already immortal, and you'll notice that a trend on this list is deal an amount of damage that is very stupid and never die. And this frame does that in absolute spades. Talking about why people don't play her. I'll give you my personal opinion because I can't speak for the community in this one. I don't like her fashion frame options. The Konkura skin we just got is actually pretty good, and I do have, I guess I could show it off here since we're done with this little segment. I do have a fit that is based off of V1 from Ultra Kill, which is pretty cool. I admittedly stole off Reddit, keeping it real. But this new, Konkura skin, I believe is what you call it, and helmet looks really good with the ephemera, or if this is a signed on, I believe actually. I don't know if people don't play Zephyr. I don't play her because I don't like the fashion frame, and I don't like how strong she feels for doing so little. I like a little bit more of an active playstyle a lot. But if you want a early game accessible, really broken frame, you should be grabbing Zephyr as soon as possible. And if you like birds are cool, but again, that whole Gooner skin remark is like 75% true. I think they just need to release a bad bitch skin for her, and they're gonna see some upticks in company value. Let's just put it that way. Moving on. I feel like anyone could have seen this coming. The Nova is just fantastic. The sheer amount of utility here, plus damage, plus survivability, is just absolutely absurd. Once I run through the abilities, you'll really understand what's going on. Null Star, 90% DR. That is so easy, disgustingly easy to manage. 2 augments, not really 2 for Null Star specifically, but Neutron Star is an incredible augment that gives this ability a ton of damage on top of being able to proc heat, which is good for Arcane Hotshot. This is the ability that other Warframes go to proc Hotshot and maintain it, and it's a really niche, strong arcane, so that being on the frame itself is incredibly good. Synergizes with Nourish as well, which you'll find a lot of Nova players running, including me. Antimatter Drop, just incredible. I mean, again, it's not quite as good as like Collective Curse, but in the regard of an ability that, first of all, God, Antimatter Drop is a cool name, by the way. That's in the script, I want to mention that. But like, it has the ability kind of similar to Clairvo, where you could turn your single target shotguns, snipers, bows into AoE nightmares for your enemies, because those weapons are able to most efficiently overload Antimatter Drop to send it to enemies. And by the way, Nova players, remember, you should recast Antimatter Drop to send it to your like cursor location really quickly. That speeds up the gameplay. Once I learned that, it sped up the gameplay loop insanely quick for me. Antimatter Drop, while having some semblance of a damage cap, is still absolutely ridiculous. Again, we're talking intended content here, so Antimatter Drop stays quite valuable in this tier list at least. Wormhole is faster than a lot of speedster Warframes, but I would say requires the most skill relative to things like Wrathful Advance, Tailwind, Mock Rush, stuff like that. And you can help your teammates. If your movement ends up being pretty good, they're gonna thank you as well. We can also move certain niche objectives. I can think of one off the top of my head, the drone on Earth bounties, Cetus bounties, which you speed up that mission by like just a lot. Keep that in mind. Wormhole, if anything, is just fun. Again, at best, it's really great movement. At worst, it's a helmet slot. Oh, God forbid, right? Unfortunately, we used to have the Natteruk sponsored particle collider, but the Geneva Convention said that's we can't have that. Molecular Prime, probably one of the best individual abilities in the entire game. The slowing form in its own right is incredibly good. You can trivialize a large amount of content in the same way that something like Gloom might. And being so accessible, so easy to use, so easy to mod for. Enemies get blown to smithereens, kind of in the same-ish regard that like Collective Curse and Antimatter Drop do. Not the same like competency, but the damage vulnerability from it is still absolutely ridiculous. The explosion radius, absolutely ridiculous. The duration, the range, the stats you get out of Molecular Prime that make it so easy to use is part of what makes it absolutely so strong. And then that doesn't even like account for the speed form. Right, in again, we're talking intended content. When we're in this kind of meta where we're already overkilling everything by Lord 20 times, your time becomes the real valuable thing, and how quickly you can do the sometimes monotonous content. There's no real difficulty. So speeding those enemies up, have them come to you quicker, get the content done faster. That is invaluable. And Nova, you know, maybe there'll be some competition with that for Nova one day, but as of now, and personally, I don't really see it happening in the future. So Nova, for that reason alone, is always going to be a top tier frame for that piece of content. Molecular Prime has some niche interactions with certain like weapons and other abilities. Try not to think about it too hard. You can check the wiki if you are a real Nova player. I would say I'm quite the fraudulent Nova player. I just use her because she's strong, and I have a lot of fun with it. As it turns out, a character who revolves around being like an antimatter nuke is really fun for me. So, but yeah, if you really get really good with Wormhole, get really good with kind of using her abilities in a cyclical fashion with Molecular Prime and to add an antimatter drop, keeping Null Star up. Molecular Fissure is the augment name, I believe. That makes it so Null Star is disgustingly easy to keep up, but you can keep priming enemies even without Molecular Prime being spam casted. Yeah, Nova's just insane. Unfortunately, I can't really do anything clickbaity here. This isn't. Anyway, Nova is kind of straight fundamentals in the same way that Rhino is. She just has infinite utility, infinite survivability, and disgusting amounts of damage. She just does everything, not in any super particular or fancy way. She just does what she says on the tin, and it's an absolutely incredible experience to play her. Strongly recommend it. The good old Geneva suggestion. Okay, so we have no line of sight, full armor stripping across the entire map. One of the like single best weapons platforms in the entire game. That same armor strip deals like a ton of scaling damage across the entire map. One of the best shield gate survivability abilities in the game. Toxic Lash is like 2-3 abilities in one. It's just so incredibly strong. It's double dipping, triple dipping, quadruple dipping, whatever damage, okay, and a pretty solid viral prime that helps spread her disease across the entire map. Saren is incredible. I'll run over the abilities. I'll give a quick yap, but I'm gonna keep this one short as I humanly can, you know, as I best can. Passive, just status duration. Most passives that are just flat buffs of better stats, we like it, right? Strong stats will take duration. Now, is it always useful? No, but with Saren, I would say generally it's gonna end up being quite useful. Spores, you get to spread spores across the map that, you know, enemies die and spread them out. It's dealing corrosive damage, corrosive procs. That damage ramps over time as long as you have the disease active on enemies. If you hit them with miasma, which we'll talk about in a second, they can keep spreading it and spreading it and spreading it. Otherwise, you have to spam cast. This is going to strip armor all the way as long as you have 2 corrosive green shards. And yeah, it's really easy. There are going to be points where you deal too much damage with this ability and you kill off all your hosts, and it sucks. So yeah, this is incredibly good. Spores also includes Venom Dose, an insanely good augment that gives you corrosive status and damage, which, oh yeah, Sarah needs more damage for sure, right? It gives it to your teammates as well. In this case, we think about like Shock and Freeze, and Shock Trooper and Freeze Force, which those abilities are only kept on Frost and Volt because of the augment. In this case, Spores is a good ability within its own right, while also having a great augment. So now you just have like a 5th ability added in there, essentially, by that perspective. It's incredibly, incredibly good. Molt is a simple and effective survivability tool, leaves behind a Molt that absorbs enemy aggression and also absorbs damage with invulnerability period, which makes it scale a ton and makes it a really, really good piece of distraction and survivability. Also great for shield gating as it has no cast time. Gives Saren some movement speed, which means if you're casting it even like semi-frequently, you're going to be really, really fast, and that's kind of what Saren wants. So really strong, great shield gating tool, especially with certain setups. And Molt is also available to go onto other Warframes. That's the ability she gives up to the helmet system, and I think it's quite an underrated one at that. Toxic Lash, just a disgusting ability. You get a bunch of toxin damage. It's not just the damage though, you get an additional hit, which is really, really broken. The damage is also doubled for melee attacks, which is really good if you like melee. All of this translates into even more corrosive procs if you're using Archon Continuity. This ability is upfront very strong, but the way that it deals the damage, as opposed to something like Eclipse or Roar, the way that it deals it as an additional hit in the same way that Zada's Whisper does, means that it does a lot of double dipping and in some cases triple dipping in the case of Bane mods. Now again, let me be so for real with you. You have a gun to my head, you tell me to switch out Bane mods, you can just pull the trigger, dude. I don't care. I'm not doing all that. But if you are someone who is trying to chase that big damage number and kill things as fast as is humanly genetically possible, that's what you enjoy, go ahead, man. Toxic Saren is probably going to be the frame you're going to use to go for that kind of achievement. Miasma is a large range stun that inflicts viral status on enemies, dealing damage per second. It also Deals more damage to enemies affected by spores. Also, when they are hit by miasma and hit by a spore, or they have a spore on them, they become hosts, meaning they can spread it further. Meaning miasma for spore builds is basically going to be required, but this ability only procs one viral status, so it becomes not as useful on the weapons platform builds, which means you just end up with a precision intensify slot if you decide to go for that. If you put roar here, I'm not going to do the spreadsheet. Basically, yeah, you might not need it, but you get a slot there for free. You don't have to sacrifice molt for survivability, and that's really good. So yeah, this whole kit is just disgusting. I mean, if you want damage, just damage, that's what you value in this game, Saren could be your number one easily. Unfortunately, that's not all this game is, so that's what leads us here. But yeah, Saren's broken. You guys probably know that, but if you don't, now you understand. You really should give this server a try. It is one of the first power trips I ever got out of this game. Like, just player. So, okay, well, she's number 2. Who could number 1 be? I wonder. With this list being as objective as humanly possible, Dante is the best Warframe in the game. The sheer amount of defensive and offensive capability this frame has is just, it's honestly ridiculous. We can go ability by ability and discuss why, in my opinion, he is a pretty, like, definitive not number 2, not number 3, number 4, he is number 1 in my view. So Dante's passive scans enemies for you, which is really great. Noctua does it. That's his Exalted Book. And then you get bonus status chance on fully scanned targets. So it doesn't stop there on the scanning part, which is incredibly useful. You also get bonus status chance as well. So that's great. Again, a stat buff, like we mentioned with Saren, a stat buff on a passive, that's all we can really ask for. You get Noctua, your Exalted Book, which is a pretty solid weapon, and in the case of like EDA, ETA, having some consistency and being able to pull Noctua out is incredibly useful. But in general, it's just a good, you get access to the tome mods, which adds a whole, again, I really hope they add more tomes. I think tome mods add a big variety into the way you want to play the game. So depending on how you decide to use Noctua, whether that is utility, straight damage, or with the secondary encumber setup we'll talk about in a second with Final Verse, Noctua is incredibly versatile and incredibly strong. Light Verse, you can make the case that Light Verse is kind of mediocre. Again, Dante is more about being the sum of his parts, not so much the individual abilities. Light Verse, you can make the case is kind of mediocre. It's a percent health heal and some overguard. But honestly, the truth is, with the strength of overguard, Light Verse is an insane ability. Getting that much overguard, even if you had to press 2 over and over and over, which thanks to Final Verse you don't. Getting overguard is just broken. It just is. If your ability can give yourself any respectable amount of overguard, it's always going to be above average. That's just the truth. I'm sorry I had to tell you. Dark Verse on its own is a bit fraudulent. It is not that great. It's an acceptable low level, like nuking ability / procs just really aren't what they used to be. But it's definitely not bad at all. But again, it's only a part of the full picture. Final Verse. So Final Verse gives Dante a total of 7 abilities without his pretty relevant passive. As we noted, his passive is strong. So you combine the light and the dark verses to create 1 of 4 abilities, 3 of them being buffs that are incredibly easy to maintain, meaning you can cast them once and forget about them for 40 to 60 seconds. And then the tragedy, the only one that is not a buff, the one that actually kills a bunch of things, you can focus on casting that more on the fly. So let's cover each one in order. So Triumph, created by 2 light verses, is, in my view, one of the single best defensive utility abilities in the entire game that isn't straight up invulnerability, which it really is just effective invulnerability. Dante and his allies gain a bunch of upfront overguard and then gain a persisting buff that gives overguard over time for each kill by Dante or his allies, up to a pretty meaningful cap as you build power strength. So this means even if somehow the overguard is constantly being melted, I know that there's that bolstering, whatever the negative modifier in ETA is, that makes it deal more damage to overguard. As long as you or your teammates are getting kills, you are all keeping each other alive with overguard over time due to the nature of overgaining. This is incredibly strong. And basically in almost, again, we're talking intended content here. In almost any piece of intended content, Triumph will keep your entire team alive with like 0 effort, 1 cast of it every 40 to 50 seconds. Super easy. Tragedy is created by 2 dark verses, and it essentially creates a large AoE expedite suffering. If you're not familiar with what that is, basically it compresses all of your DOTs, in this case / heat and toxin, into one single instance of damage. So like status duration that would normally tick over time, it's compressed into one big instance of damage, and it's then multiplied. Tragedy multiplies that value as well. So if you are building, whether it's your Noctua or you're using like the Phantasma or whatever to apply a bunch of heat, however you decide to do it, you know, Convectrix, whatever, however you decide to deal those DOTs, Tragedy allows you to deal it all at once and absolutely just de-atomize whatever is marked with your status effects. Absolutely absurd damage ability. It's the one I find myself casting the least, but it nukes. I usually just use weapons on Dante. That's kind of my playstyle. Next is Word Warden, created by a light verse followed by a dark verse. This puts a copy of Noctua, a modded copy, on affected allies, causing Noctua to attack enemies who are hit by your allies' weapons, dealing a percentage of Noctua's modded damage. This is able to proc statuses and arcanes, such as Arcane Impetus, giving Dante permanent max uptime on Impetus, along with a ton of damage for him and his whole team. This is ability efficiency, for those unfamiliar with Impetus, because it is a semi-niche arcane. This is this is like more than 70 ability strength and more than 30 ability efficiency, from what I can recall. So yeah, that's a little bit absurd. And this helps with scanning, this helps with your status chance, stuff like that from your passive. So yeah, just more damage, and it scales with about as fast as your enemies or as your allies can attack. I believe Noctua is capped. I checked the wiki. It's at like 9 attacks per second, which is absurd. So you are getting a ton of damage that way, and Noctua is also proccing its statuses as well. So depending on what those statuses are, you can get an insane amount of. It can be a vital primer, corrosive armor melter, whatever you want Noctua to be. It can be. It is just stupid. It's just so dumb. And then the dumbest of them all, maybe, to be honest, is Page Flight. Page Flight is created by a dark verse followed by a light verse, and sends out 3 spectral birds, or paragrims, depending on if you're educated or not, who are completely invulnerable, have a high threat level, so they absorb enemy aggression and attack enemies, making them more vulnerable to both status chance and status damage. That scales with power strength. This, in my view, is essentially it's a mark for death, basically. And the AI is advanced enough, it knows it needs to spread the debuff, so it prioritizes attacking everything once and marking it once. This all scales with power strength. They proc slash on their own, which isn't the most valuable part, but yeah, status damage and status vulnerability on automated birds that just fly around, and the duration of the vulnerability is like forever, basically until the enemy dies. The enemy will die. Dante can have all 3 buff versions of Final Verse at the same time. So that's Page Flight, Word Warden, and Triumph at the same time. And then cast Tragedy whenever he wants. They're pretty easy to cast as long as you get decent with it. And the sound design on Dante too. Oh lord. So to describe what I think Dante, when we're talking about purely intended content, is it's not very close in my view. Some of the rankings here, like Mirage, Rhino, are like close. I think Dante is like a fairly uncontested rank 1. He can make his team, again, we're talking about team value here. I talked about this at the start with Volt. Team value is a component of this list. Dante makes his entire team and himself basically invulnerable. Triumph is just stupid. Hey, I don't make the rules, okay? The amount of damage he gives his team access to, he can run Roar himself, by the way, so he can do that because Word Warden still works with Noctua, even if you take Noctua out, even if you're not using the Exalted Weapon. So he can equip Roar to give his team more damage. Page Flight gives his team more damage. Word Warden gives his team more damage. Triumph makes them completely invulnerable. The amount of net extra value, whether that is through Overguard or through damage vulnerability and straight up damage, that Dante provides his entire team, his 3 other teammates, and himself, is just stupid. It is so hard to lose any piece of content if you have a Dante on your team. Like, this frame is so stupid! It's so dumb, and the buffs are so easy to maintain, and the sound design's so good, and he's a mage. I do love this frame. I will say, is he one of my favorites? Absolutely not. Again, instantly winning is not always the most fun for me, and I just think there's more fun frames, but in terms of the best frame in the game, I do believe it's Dante, and I really don't believe that it's close. Hey guys, if you made it through this whole thing, thank you so much. The support means the world to me. This whole thing became much more. This endeavor was initially going to be like a 30 minutes, 40-minute video. And then I got to work on this intro for Rhino that I was making, and I like, oh, every single frame on this list needs that little intro for the editing, and I can't help myself, so I did it for all of the frames on the list. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the editing. Obviously leave some feedback in the comments, and as every single one of my YouTube videos is, it's an open forum for discussion. So if you agree with me, disagree, something in between, you have your opinions you just want to espouse in my comments, this is the time and place to do it. Thank you guys for the support, especially if you made it this far in the video. As promised, the 5 frames that in my view just didn't quite cut it, I think I'm gonna open maybe like a Patreon or members only for like a couple bucks a month or something, and maybe I'll talk about it there, or I'll make a whole separate video for free. I don't really know yet. The 5 frames in no particular order that did not make it are Mag, Sebagoth, Titania, Octavia, and Mesa. I do have reasons listed, but this video is long enough. Thank you guys so much for the love. It means the world to me. Even if you disagree with the list entirely, you make it through, leave some constructive criticism, I'd appreciate it. It means the whole world to me. I have so much love for you guys, and the support through the last year, little less than a year, has just been great. Some of the comments, man, make my entire day. So thank you, and as always, I'll see you in the next one. Much love, take care, see you later.